All right, so today we're diving into something I think we all have a pretty interesting relationship with cell phones. You guys sent in a ton of stuff on this.
Yeah, it's quite a mixed bag, really.
Right, we've got like personal stories, research summaries, and even some, I don't know, almost like a manifesto about like digital sanity.
It is a bit ironic, isn't it? Using all this tech to dissect how much tech we use.
Exactly. But that's kind of the whole point of this deep dive, right? To really dig into why we're so drawn to these things, but also like what makes us anxious about them.
And especially what all this means for, younger people growing up with all this.
Yeah, that's huge. So where do we even begin with all
Well,
this?
I think it's pretty amazing how quickly we went from those, clunky calculators to these mini computers we carry everywhere.
I know, like one of the sources actually talked about those old calculators. Remember the ones with the red LEDs?
Oh, yeah. But seriously, cell phones have totally revolutionized how we communicate, though maybe not always in a good way.
That's what a lot of the sources seem to be saying. Like all the in-person stuff gets kind of messed up by phones.
Like those slow walkers on campus glued to their screens.
Uh, don't even get me started. But it's more than just annoying, right? It's affecting how we connect with each other in real life. Like, some professors have to actually ban phones in class now.
Wow. Yeah, one teacher said something that really stuck with me. They said young people never really leave school anymore because they've got their whole world in their pocket.
That's deep. All their friends, their worries, and like a million notifications all the time.
Makes you wonder, do you ever feel that pressure to be on all the time? Like, do you ever miss disconnecting?
Honestly, I can't even imagine life without a smartphone now. But for Gen Z, it's like a totally different reality.
I mean, the research shows that 16% of people under 30 are seriously dependent on their phones.
16%. Wow. And then you've got things like Snapchat streaks. It's like this constant need to stay in touch is just normal now.
But the Royal Society for Public Health, they found that platforms like that, Snapchat, Instagram, they're linked to, some pretty negative mental health
Yeah.
stuff, especially in younger people.
Okay, get this. Some sources are saying that too much phone use might actually be changing kids' brains. Like physically, there's this thing called cortical thinning.
Yeah, the cortex is basically your brain's control center, right? So thinning, especially when you're young, could mean that phones are actually messing with brain development.
Whoa. That's a little scary, right? And they're still doing research on all that, but it's wild to think that our phone habits could have like real physical consequences.
It makes you wonder about the long-term effects for sure.
And over half of Gen Z are on their phones for like 5 hours or more every day. Plus, almost a third of them can't handle being without it for even 30 minutes.
So we're super connected, but maybe that's actually making it harder to connect in person.
It's like a weird paradox. And then don't forget there was the pandemic. Like everyone had to rely on their phones even more.
It's true. They became like lifelines for a lot of people, but I think it came with a cost too.
Yeah, during lockdown, I basically lived on my phone. It was the only way to see anyone or do anything. But now, like, it's hard to turn it off.
Yeah. Before we get into those personal experiences, maybe we should zoom out a bit. The sources also point to some bigger issues with phones that go way beyond just being annoying.
Okay, so what are the like capital B big reasons why phones are bad?
Well, one source puts it pretty simply. It's about ignoring people, getting addicted, and just wasting a ton of time.
Ouch. I mean, we've all done it, right? But is that really how we want to spend our time?
Good point. What about those smaller things the source mentions? The ones that maybe don't seem like a big deal but add up over time?
Right, right. What were those again?
Things like not sleeping enough because of the blue light, or, your eyes getting tired from looking at the tiny screen all day.
Yeah, those do add up. And this might sound obvious, but are phones worse for like kids or adults?
Oh, the sources actually talk about that. And apparently it's worse for kids. Their brains and bodies are still growing, so they might not be as good at controlling their screen time as, well, we'd like to think we are.
Interesting. So we've got this incredible technology, but it's got some pretty serious downsides. But it's not all bad, right? Like the sources also talk about finding balance with all this.
Definitely.
Hmm.
And one of the simplest but most powerful things they suggest is just being present with the people around you.
Mm.
Put the phone down, have a real conversation, actually be in the moment.
It sounds so simple, but yeah, it's actually really important.
Right. And it doesn't have to be this huge dramatic change. Just start small. Put your phone away when you're eating or make certain times phone free. Just ease back into the real world a little bit.
I love that. It's not about like throwing your phone in the trash. It's about finding a way to coexist with it in a healthier way.
Right. Set some boundaries, take back some of your attention.
So let's recap what we've learned so far in this deep dive. We started by nerding out about how far technology has come, from those old calculators to these crazy powerful smartphones.
Yeah, but then we got into the downsides of being constantly connected, the interruptions, the potential impact on our brains, all that stuff.
These heavy stuff.
And then there's the whole pandemic thing. Like, our phones saved us in some ways, but now we might be even more dependent on them than before.
Okay, before we move on, I want to hear from you. What stands out to you from all this? What's really hitting home?
What are you taking away from this conversation? Let us know. This is such a relevant topic, and it really affects all of us in some way.
We've only just scratched the surface, so stick around. We'll be back with part 2, where we'll get into even more insights and talk about some practical ways to navigate this whole, constant connectivity thing.
Yeah, it's a lot to think about, isn't it?
Mm.
And that's why it's so important to be, aware of all this, to talk about it, and to make conscious choices about, how we use our phones.
Right before the little break there, you were talking about the pandemic and how, phones were both lifelines and kind of stressful at the same time.
Yeah, it was a weird time for sure.
It really was. And one of the sources, it actually dives deeper into that, how teenagers using their phones more during COVID is linked to, well, this is heavy, but a higher risk of, suicidal thoughts and actions.
It really highlights how complicated all this is, doesn't it? Phones did offer connection during a really isolating time, but for some people, especially, younger people, it maybe had some unintended consequences.
It's like we can't just look at the technology itself, right? We got to think about the whole context, what's going on in people's lives, everything.
Definitely. And all those bigger reasons we were talking about, the
Oh, yeah.
ignoring, the addiction, the wasting time, it's easy to just dismiss it as a minor annoyance.
Yeah, but they're actually pointing to some deeper problems, aren't they?
I think so. Like with the ignoring thing, it might not seem like a big deal to, constantly check your phone when you're with someone.
Yeah.
But it's like you're saying they're not as important as whatever's on your screen.
Right. It's kind of disrespectful, even if you don't mean it that way. And then there's the whole addiction thing, when your phone is the first thing you reach for, even when you're in the middle of something else.
And that can lead to wasting so much time.
Mm-hmm.
Like you get caught in that scroll hole, and then you realize you could have been doing something, well, anything else.
It's true. We all do it. But, the sources aren't saying we should, check our phones in the ocean and live off the grid or something.
Right. It's all about balance,
Yeah.
right? Recognizing that these are tools. And like any tool, you can use it in a good way or a bad way.
So how do we find that balance between, being connected and also being present in the real world?
One source suggested starting small. Maybe put your phone away during meals. Or have some, phone-free time during the day.
Yeah, reclaim some of that time and attention. And maybe try being more intentional with it. Instead of just mindlessly scrolling, you ask yourself, okay, what am I actually trying to get out of this?
Exactly. Be mindful. Make conscious choices.
It's interesting. One thing that really stood out to me from all these sources was this idea that, technology itself isn't good or bad. It's just a tool.
Totally. And that's where things get, really fascinating because it's not just about individual choices, right?
Mhm.
It's also about the whole social and cultural stuff that shapes how we use tech.
What do you mean by that? What kind of stuff?
Well, think about, how social media is designed. They want to keep you engaged,
Mhm.
keep you coming back for more.
Ew.
The algorithms, they're designed to play on, our psychology.
Yeah.
Make us feel that FOMO, compare ourselves to others.
Oh, the worst.
We're just bombarded with notifications and messages all the time. So no wonder we feel addicted.
So it's not just about willpower. It's we're up against these, I don't know, forces that are designed to keep us hooked.
But the thing is, if you're aware of those forces, you can start to, push back a little.
Yeah. Take back some control. It makes me think about those little things we talked about earlier, like the blue light and the eye strain.
Right.
It might seem small compared to, addiction and comparing yourself to people online, but it's still important.
It all adds up. And it shows how our relationship with tech isn't just in our heads, it's physical too.
So besides throwing our phones away and going to live in a cave, what can we do about all that?
There's some simple things, like taking breaks from your screen, adjusting the brightness, making sure you blink.
Blinking, so important.
And think about your posture, how you're sitting. Small changes can really help.
It's all about those little adjustments and remembering that, like, well-being is more than just mental health. It's also about your body, your connections with people, your purpose.
It's all connected. And it's about finding that balance where you can use technology without, sacrificing all that other good stuff.
Absolutely. One thing I found really helpful in the sources was this idea of self-compassion. Like, it's easy to get down on yourself about your phone habits, but we're all just figuring this out, you know?
Totally. We're all in this together. And it's okay to, mess up sometimes. Have days where you feel overwhelmed. Just be kind to yourself.
Before we wrap up this part, I'm curious, what's your biggest takeaway from all this so far? What's really sticking with you?
Is there anything that's making you think differently about your own relationship with your phone?
Yeah, it's so easy to get sucked into constantly checking and scrolling and comparing yourself to everyone else online.
It really is.
But it's like real life is still happening all around us, you know? And
Yeah.
those real experiences, the connections with people, that's what actually
I
matters.
love how you put that. It's about shifting our focus from, like, the virtual world to the real world.
One thing that really stuck with me from all this research was this idea that for young people especially, technology has made it so there's no separation between school and life anymore.
Right, they're always connected.
It's like they never get a break.
That's such a good point. And it
Yeah.
makes me think, like, we need to be way more aware of how technology is affecting kids,
Absolutely. We can't just give them these devices and be like, okay, good luck, figure it out.
Right.
We need to actually talk to them about the downsides, about setting boundaries, about how important it is to have real life friends and experiences.
It's about giving them the tools to use technology in a healthy way, not letting it, take over their lives.
And that starts with us, right? Like, we can't tell kids to have balance if we're the ones who are always on our phones.
Actions speak louder than words, right?
Exactly. It's about creating a culture where it's okay to put your phone down, to talk to people face to face, to just enjoy being in the moment.
Yeah, to actually be present.
After doing all this research for this deep dive, I actually feel, I don't know, hopeful.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, there are definitely challenges with all this technology, but people are starting to realize that and wanting to find a better way.
And that awareness, that's the first step to actually changing things, both for ourselves and for, like, society as a whole.
Well, we've reached the end of our deep dive, and we always like to leave you with something to think about.
So now that you've heard all this about the good and the bad of being constantly connected, what's one small step what you can take today to be more present and a little less reliant on your phone?
Maybe it's putting your phone away during dinner or taking a walk without it. Whatever it is, we challenge you to give it a try.
It's been a fascinating conversation.
And we hope you've learned some stuff along the way. Remember, you have the power to choose how you interact with technology. Until next time, be present, be mindful, and be well.